Girl vanished after writing in her diary. 19 years later, her mother hears her voice in a viral TikTok song. In the sleepy town of Pinewood, where autumn leaves gathered in perfect piles along Maple Street, 16-year-old Cassie Reynolds was known for three things: her infectious laugh, her old-fashioned leather-bound diary, and her hauntingly beautiful singing voice. The kind of voice that made her choir teacher, Mrs. Halloway, tear up during solo performances and prompted countless suggestions that she should audition for American Idol. But Cassie preferred writing her songs in private, filling her diary with lyrics that she claimed came to her in dreams. Her mother, Diana, often found her daughter hunched over that worn leather book in the early hours of the morning, scribbling frantically as if afraid the words might evaporate from her mind before she could capture them on paper. "They're not really my words," Cassie would explain with a mysterious smile whenever Diana asked about her songwriting process. "I'm just borrowing them from somewhere else. Someday they'll make sense." Diana chalked it up to teenage dramatics and creative expression, never imagining those words would become the center of the most perplexing mystery Pinewood had ever witnessed. The Reynolds family home sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, a two-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch where Cassie would often sit with her diary, watching the neighborhood kids ride bikes or her younger brother Ethan practice skateboard tricks. The weekend before she disappeared, Cassie had been particularly prolific in her writing, filling page after page with lyrics that seemed more urgent, more coherent than her usual dreamy fragments. "It's like they're getting louder," she told her best friend Jenna over the phone. "The songs in my head, like they're trying to tell me something important." That final Sunday in October 2004, the family had gathered for their traditional pasta dinner. Diana noticed her daughter seemed distracted, humming unfamiliar melodies under her breath and occasionally stopping mid-conversation to jot something down in the small notebook she'd taken to carrying everywhere. Later, Diana would obsessively replay every moment of that evening, searching for clues she might have missed. The way Cassie had suddenly shivered despite the heat from the oven. How she'd paused at the kitchen window claiming she saw lights. Dancing in the backyard. The strange comment she'd made about frequencies aligning. But in the moment, it had all seemed like typical teenage quirkiness from her artistic daughter. "I think I'm going to record something tonight," Cassie announced as she helped clear the dishes. "I finally have all the pieces." Her father, Robert, a high school history teacher, had smiled encouragingly and reminded her not to stay up too late on a school night. Ethan had rolled his eyes and asked if her weird music would keep him awake again. And Diana had kissed her daughter's forehead, completely unaware that it would be the last time she'd see her for nearly 2 decades. The night air carried an unusual static charge as a storm system approached from the west. Cassie retreated to her bedroom around 8, carrying her diary and a glass of water. Diana remembered hearing soft singing through the wall as she folded laundry in the master bedroom. The melody was unfamiliar, but entrancing, with lyrics about crossing boundaries and slipping between worlds that Diana would later recognize with a chill when they resurfaced in the most impossible way. Around 10, the house fell silent. Diana assumed Cassie had gone to sleep. When Diana knocked on Cassie's door the next morning to wake her for school, there was no answer. Thinking her daughter had overslept, she pushed the door open to find an empty, perfectly made bed. Cassie's backpack sat ready by her desk, lunch already packed inside, evidence she'd planned on attending school. Her diary lay open on her pillow, a pen beside it as if she'd been writing moments before. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. "The music is pulling me through. I can almost see the other side where the window was open, curtains billowing gently in the morning breeze. But it had rained heavily overnight, and there were no wet footprints on the carpet beneath the window, no mud on the sill." Cassie's phone charger was still plugged in, her phone nowhere to be found. Her jacket hung on the back of her chair. Even more perplexing, her beloved recording equipment, the microphone and small digital recorder she'd received for her birthday, remained untouched on her desk, though she'd explicitly mentioned wanting to record something that night. Most baffling of all was what the Reynolds family discovered when they played back Cassie's last recording session from her computer. The file, timestamped 10:14 p.m. the night before, contained only static and strange electronic tones for nearly 8 minutes. Then, at the very end, Cassie's voice could be heard saying clearly, "I can hear you now. I'm coming." The audio experts who later examined the recording could not explain the unusual interference patterns, or the fact that spectrographic analysis showed frequencies that technically shouldn't have been possible to capture with Cassie's amateur equipment. Diana called the police immediately after discovering Cassie's empty room. Robert canvassed the neighborhood, while Ethan checked all of Cassie's favorite spots in town. By noon, the entire Pinewood Police Department was involved in the search. Cassie's face appeared on missing person flyers stapled to telephone poles, pinned to community bulletin boards, and eventually broadcast on regional news. Her disappearance made no sense. A responsible teenager with no history of running away, no boyfriend troubles, no drug issues, no apparent reason to vanish from a locked house in the middle of a rainstorm without taking any of her belongings. The initial investigation focused on Cassie's social circle. Her friends were questioned extensively about her state of mind in the days before she disappeared. Jenna mentioned the increasingly intense focus on her songwriting, but insisted Cassie had seemed excited, not troubled. She kept saying she was on the verge of something big, like she was about to discover something important, Jenna told the detectives. But she was happy about it, like creatively fulfilled, you know. None of her other friends reported any concerning behavior, and her online presence, minimal by today's standards in the early days of social media, revealed nothing unusual. As the days stretched into weeks, the investigation expanded, registered. Sex offenders in the area were interviewed. Cassie's computer was examined for evidence of communication with strangers. Neighboring towns were alerted. Dive teams searched the lake at the edge of town. Dogs tracked her scent to the end of the driveway before losing it completely, as if she'd simply vanished into thin air. One detective commented that it was as if Cassie had been beamed up by aliens, a remark that made headlines in the local paper and sparked a series of increasingly wild theories among Pinewood residents. The diary became a central focus of the investigation. Detectives pored over Cassie's lyrics and writings, looking for hidden messages or clues about her state of mind. What they found was puzzling. Page after page of songs that seemed to describe experiences beyond normal reality. References to crossing the veil, following the frequency, and singing across dimensions. Several entries mentioned dreams of performing for audiences that hadn't been born yet, and rooms made of light where time moves differently. The police psychologist suggested Cassie might have been experiencing early symptoms of schizophrenia or another mental health condition causing delusions. But her school counselor and family doctor both strongly disagreed, insisting she'd shown no signs of psychological distress. Most unsettling were the final entries, written in the week before her disappearance. They contained specific lyrics about when the storm aligns with the song, stepping through the static and becoming sound itself. The final, incomplete entry seemed to suggest Cassie believed she was about to go somewhere or experience something extraordinary. Was it a metaphor for suicide? Had she planned to run away? Or was there something more inexplicable at work? For Diana Reynolds, the absence of answers was unbearable. As the official investigation cooled, she became increasingly obsessed with finding her daughter. She refused to change anything in Cassie's room, preserving it exactly as it had been that October night. She studied the diary endlessly, consulting musicians, linguists, and eventually even psychics about the mysterious lyrics. She maintained, a website dedicated to finding Cassie, and appeared on true crime television shows whenever producers expressed interest in the case. The family's savings dwindled as she hired private investigators whose investigations inevitably led nowhere. Robert, initially supportive of Diana's relentless pursuit, eventually reached his breaking point 5 years after Cassie's disappearance. "We have to learn to live with not knowing," he told Diana during an argument that neighbors could hear from the sidewalk. "We still have a son who needs us." Their marriage collapsed under the weight of their grief, with Robert moving out in 2010 and finalizing their divorce a year later. Ethan, who'd been 12 when his sister vanished, grew into adulthood in the shadow of her absence, eventually leaving for college across the country, returning to Pinewood only for brief, uncomfortable holiday visits. Diana remained in the family home alone, working as a librarian and dedicating her evenings to Cassie's case. She compiled thousands of pages of notes, followed up on hundreds of reported sightings, and maintained connections with a dwindling network of supporters who hadn't forgotten about her daughter. She became a familiar, somewhat pitied figure in Pinewood, the mother who couldn't let go. Most people in town had long since accepted that Cassie was dead, likely murdered by a transient killer who'd left no evidence behind. Some of the crueler teenage rumors suggested she'd run away to pursue a music career and had simply abandoned her family. Only Diana insisted that the truth was still out there, waiting to be discovered. The years passed. Flip phones gave way to smartphones. Social media platforms rose and fell. Streaming replaced radio. The world transformed, while Diana remained anchored to October 2004, to the last night she'd seen her daughter. On the 15th anniversary of Cassie's disappearance, the local newspaper ran a retrospective piece that referred to the case as Pinewood's enduring mystery and praised Diana's dedication, while gently suggesting that closure might never come. Diana cut out the article and added it to her files without comment. In early 2023, Diana's niece Zoe, Ethan's daughter, came to stay with her for a few weeks during a gap in her college housing. At 19, Zoe had only known her aunt Diana as the sad woman obsessed with her missing cousin, a cousin she had never met. During her stay, Zoe often found Diana in Cassie's preserved bedroom, reading from the diary or listening to old recordings of her daughter's voice. Concerned about her aunt's isolation and ongoing grief, Zoe made efforts to connect with her, introducing her to new technologies and trying to engage her with the present. "Aunt Diana, you should get on TikTok," Zoe suggested one evening as they sat at the kitchen table. "There are all these communities of people interested in unsolved mysteries. Maybe someone there could help with Cassie's case." Diana had been resistant to new social media platforms, maintaining only the outdated website and Facebook page dedicated to finding her daughter. But something about Zoe's enthusiasm persuaded her to download the app and create an account. Over the next few days, Zoe helped Diana navigate TikTok, showing her how to find content related to missing persons and true crime. Diana was overwhelmed by the platform's frenetic energy, but admitted there was something compelling about seeing so many young people engaged with stories like Cassie's. Zoe recorded a short video of Diana holding Cassie's photo and explaining the basic facts of her disappearance. To their surprise, it gained modest traction, with users offering theories and support in the comments. On a Wednesday afternoon in March, as Zoe scrolled through her For You page while Diana prepared dinner, a particular sound caught Diana's attention from across the room. A snippet of melody that made her freeze, knife suspended over the cutting board. "Wait," she said, her voice tight with sudden emotion. "Play that again." Zoe replayed the video, a trending song called Echoes Between by an artist named VRTX. The track featured heavily processed electronic beats with ethereal female vocals layered throughout. While the main vocalist was clearly identified as VRTX in the video caption, there was something about the background harmonies that had triggered Diana's response. The song had gone viral for its haunting quality and mysterious lyrics about traveling through waves of time and messages sent from another world. "That voice in the background," Diana said, her hands shaking as she took the phone from Zoe. "Play it again. Listen to the harmonies, not the main vocal." They replayed the video several times, with Diana growing increasingly agitated. "It's her. It's Cassie." Zoe was skeptical, but humored her aunt, helping her find the full version of the song online. Diana insisted they play it through the home stereo system, closing her eyes to focus on the layered vocals. Halfway through the song, she suddenly stood up and rushed to Cassie's room, returning moments later with the diary. She flipped frantically through the pages until she found what she was looking for, an entry from September 2004. "Listen to and these lyrics and tell me if they sound familiar," Diana said, her voice trembling as she read aloud from Cassie's diary. "When time folds like paper and the stars redirect their light, I'll be waiting in the frequency between yesterday and tomorrow, singing songs to guide you to where I exist." She looked up at Zoe, her eyes wide. "Now listen to the background vocals in the bridge." As they replayed the song, focusing on the barely audible harmonies beneath the main vocal, the similarity was undeniable. Not just the words, which matched almost exactly, but the distinctive way certain notes were approached and sustained. A vocal fingerprint as unique as Cassie's. Even more incredibly, as they continued comparing the song to Cassie's writings, they discovered that nearly every background lyric in Echoes Between corresponded to entries in the diary, some written just days before her disappearance. "This isn't coincidence," Diana insisted, her voice oscillating between excitement and disbelief. "That's my daughter's voice. Those are her exact words." Written in 2004, before this VRTX person was probably even born. After spending the entire night analyzing the song and comparing it to Cassie's recordings and writings, Diana contacted Detective Maria Sanchez, who had taken over Cassie's cold case 5 years earlier. Initially skeptical, Sanchez agreed to listen to both the viral song and Cassie's old recordings. After consulting with audio forensic specialists, she acknowledged there were compelling similarities worth investigating. Within days, police had traced VRTX to a music producer named Victor Reyes, who operated an experimental electronic music studio in Chicago. Reyes, a 30-year-old producer known for incorporating unusual samples and sounds in his work, initially denied any knowledge of Cassie Reynolds when questioned by Chicago police working with Detective Sanchez. He claimed all vocals on Echoes Between were performed by session singers or created using vocal synthesis software, but when confronted with the lyrical similarities to Cassie's diary, a diary that had never been published or shared publicly, his confidence faltered. After several hours of questioning, he requested a lawyer and refused to answer further questions. A search warrant for Reyes's studio revealed a sophisticated setup far beyond what most independent producers could afford, with equipment that audio engineers described as experimental and cutting-edge. Hidden in a locked storage room, investigators discovered stacks of journals filled with technical diagrams, theoretical equations, and references to acoustic time displacement and extracting temporal resonances. Most disturbing was a list of names that included Cassandra Reynolds, Pinewood, successful extraction, 1804. As the investigation intensified, 3 former colleagues of Reyes came forward with an incredible story. According to their testimony, Reyes had been part of a secretive research collective called Frequency Frontier that had operated between 2003 and 2006. Led by a brilliant but unstable physicist named Dr. Eleanor West, the group had been exploring the theoretical possibility that sound waves could, under certain conditions, transcend normal temporal boundaries, essentially that voices could be captured from different points in time. "We thought it was all theoretical," explained former group member Tasha Lynn in her statement to police. Eleanor had these equations suggesting that certain vocal frequencies, combined with specific electromagnetic conditions, could create tiny, temporary ruptures in space-time. We were trying to build equipment sensitive enough to detect these anomalies, maybe record ambient sounds from the past or future, but Victor became obsessed with the idea of extracting complete vocal performances, actual singing voices from specific people. Another former member, Marcus Wong, described how the group had identified naturally receptive individuals whose vocal characteristics made them potential conduits for what they called temporal harmonics. Using weather pattern data and complex algorithms, they had allegedly identified several young singers across the country whose voices exhibited the rare qualities needed for their experiments. According to Wong, they had initially planned only to passively record these individuals by setting up specialized equipment near their homes. But Victor took it further, Wong stated. He modified the equipment to not just receive, but transmit. He believed that by sending the right frequency pattern to receptive subjects during ideal atmospheric conditions, like certain types of electrical storms, he could create a two-way connection. We all thought it was ridiculous, impossible. When Eleanor found out what he was doing, she shut down the entire project and destroyed most of the research. We never imagined he had actually succeeded. The third colleague, Dr. James Kaplan, provided the most disturbing account. There was one night in October 2004 when Victor called me in a panic. He'd set up his modified equipment near a house in some small town during a thunderstorm. He claimed that something had gone wrong, that the subject had somehow become entangled with the frequency pattern he was transmitting. He was rambling about how she had crossed over or been pulled into the wave. I thought he was having a psychotic break and told him to seek psychiatric help. I never heard from him again until years later when he resurfaced as VRTX. As incredible as these testimonies seemed, they aligned with the bizarre circumstances of Cassie's disappearance. The open window during the rainstorm, the strange static on her final recording, the mid-sentence diary entry. Technical experts examining Reyes' equipment confirmed it contained components that could potentially generate the unusual frequency patterns found in both Cassie's last recording and the viral TikTok song. Most convincingly, audio forensic analysts with advanced voice recognition software confirmed with 97% certainty that the background vocals in Echoes Between belonged to Cassie Reynolds, despite the various effects and processing applied to the track. Armed with this evidence, Detective Sanchez obtained a warrant for Reyes's arrest, but when police arrived at his apartment, they found it empty, save for a hastily scrawled note. "She's still singing. Follow the frequency." Technical equipment in the apartment had been set to generate a continuous loop of the specific tonal pattern identified in both Cassie's last recording and Echoes Between. Power had been rerouted to ensure the equipment would continue running, even if the main electricity was cut. A nationwide manhunt for Reyes led investigators to an abandoned research facility in rural Nevada, previously owned by a defunct tech company with connections to Dr. West's early work. As local police and FBI agents approached the facility, they reported hearing what sounded like a young woman's voice singing, amplified to an impossible volume that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Weather satellites detected unusual electromagnetic activity over the area, despite clear skies. What they found inside defied rational explanation. In a central chamber filled with speakers, microphones, and equipment that one FBI technician described as decades ahead of current technology, Victor Reyes sat calmly at a control panel. And in a glass-walled room at the center, surrounded by what appeared to be visualized sound waves, floating in the air like luminous ribbons, stood Cassie Reynolds, exactly as she had been in 2004, not a day older, still wearing the pajamas she'd had on the night she disappeared, still clutching her pen, as if she'd just been writing in her diary. "She's been caught in the resonance pattern," Reyes explained as he was taken into custody. "Existing in a state of acoustic suspension outside normal time. Every few years, the pattern weakens enough for fragments of her voice to escape, That's what I've been collecting and incorporating into my music. I've been trying to find a way to reverse the process, to bring her back completely. Today's atmospheric conditions finally made it possible. Medical personnel who examined Cassie reported that while she was physically unharmed, her perception of time had been severely distorted. To her, only hours had passed since she'd been writing in her diary in her bedroom. She had no memory of being somewhere else for 19 years, only a sense of having been everywhere at once and hearing countless voices singing her songs back to her before they were even written. Neurologists and physicists studying her case were baffled by brain scans showing patterns of activity that one researcher described as temporally non-linear. Cassie could recall events she couldn't possibly have witnessed during her absence, and described technological developments with accuracy she shouldn't have possessed. Most remarkably, she continued to write songs containing lyrics that seemed to predict future events, explaining that she was still borrowing words from elsewhere. For Diana Reynolds, the impossible return of her daughter, still 16 while she herself had aged into her 60s, brought both joy and challenges beyond anything she could have imagined. The reunion at the Nevada facility, captured by news helicopters overhead, showed Diana collapsing to her knees as she embraced her daughter for the first time in nearly 2 decades. "I never stopped listening for you," she whispered as cameras rolled, creating a moment that would become one of the most viewed videos in social media history. The Reynolds case transformed scientific understanding of acoustic physics, temporal mechanics, and the nature of consciousness itself. Victor Reyes, charged with kidnapping and illegal human experimentation, maintained throughout his trial that he had never intended to harm Cassie, that her entrapment in the frequency dimension had been an accident, and his subsequent work had been devoted to finding a way to bring her back. Evidence from his journal suggested he had indeed spent years developing the technology that eventually allowed her return, though prosecutors argued this did not excuse his original actions or his failure to come forward earlier. For Cassie, reintegration into a world that had continued without her presented extraordinary difficulties. Her brother Ethan was now older than their parents had been when she disappeared. Her friends had grown up, started families, built careers. The technology, culture, and music she encountered seemed alien, yet strangely familiar, as if she had glimpsed it all during her time in what scientists were now calling the acoustic suspension state. Perhaps most remarkable was the phenomenon that occurred when Cassie began performing music again. Audience members reported experiences of temporal disorientation, memories of events that hadn't happened, visions of possible futures, and an overwhelming sense of existing in multiple moments simultaneously. Researchers documented measurable temporal anomalies in the vicinity of her performances, leading some theoretical physicists to suggest that her voice had become a conduit between different points in space-time, a living embodiment of the temporal harmonics that Frequency Frontier had sought to understand. In her first public interview, conducted 6 months after her return, Cassie offered what became the definitive description of her experience. "Time isn't a line, it's a song. Every moment exists simultaneously, like notes in a chord. What happened to me is that I became part of the music instead of just playing it, and now I can hear all the verses at once. What was, what is, what might be. The diary was never just mine. I was writing down what I heard from across time, including my own future voice. It's all one continuous melody, looping back on itself." She paused, smiling at the interviewer's bewildered expression. "Don't worry if it doesn't make sense yet. Sometimes you have to hear the chorus a few times before you understand the lyrics." As for Diana Reynolds, whose unwavering belief had sustained her through 19 years of searching, she published Cassie's diary alongside her own journals, documenting her search, creating a remarkable dual narrative that became both a best-selling book and the basis for a documentary series. In a poignant twist that media outlets called Life Imitating Art Imitating Life, the theme song for the documentary, composed by Cassie herself, went viral on TikTok, with users around the world creating videos in which they recited entries from Diana's journals, while Cassie's voice sang harmonies in the background. Many reported strange experiences while participating in the trend, dreams of moments from Cassie's missing years, sudden insights into their own futures, and the uncanny feeling that someone was singing along with them from somewhere or somewhen else. The final mystery of the Reynolds case remains unsolved to this day. Whenever Cassie performs the song she was writing the night she disappeared, now titled The Other Side Where, listeners consistently report hearing a different teenage girl's voice harmonizing in the background, singing lyrics about being lost and searching for a way home. Cassie insists this is normal, just another verse in the endless song of time. Everyone who's listening closely is part of the same melody, she explains. We're all just singing to each other across the boundaries, hoping someone will recognize our voice and help us find our way back to where we belong.